That day, a cold rain was falling outside. In a room facing our garden, I was organizing the estate of my late husband. All these items were cherished by my husband, but I can't see any value in them. For now, I had arranged all the relics in the room, intending to have them appraised. Then, with heavy footsteps, my eldest son and his wife entered the room. I turned around and said, "Please don't come in without permission." Catherine retorted with a grin. As usual, acting all high and mighty, revealing her hostility. This daughter-in-law has been disliking me since the beginning of her marriage, always adopting a rebellious attitude. However, her demeanor this time was different, not the usual yapping of a wild dog, but something else. She had an air of a victor, a sense of ease. I didn't understand the reason, but, straightening my dress, I faced them and said, "I've laid out your father's belongings, you can take whatever you like," showing the antiques with my hand. Then, Catherine snorted. "I don't need such junk. Rather, can you leave soon? We're taking this house," she said, crossing her arms and looking down at me. Looking at Tom, my eldest son, he was nervously swallowing and avoiding eye contact. Suddenly, Catherine elbowed him. Tom, with a fearful look towards Catherine, turned to me and declared in an unnaturally high voice, "This house is in my name. Get out quickly." I sighed, realizing that this day had finally come, and looked at my husband's portrait in the back. My husband, with his gentle smile. He seems to have been practically made dead by this couple. With resolve, I firmly looked into their eyes and answered, "All right." The couple seemed slightly puzzled by my easy agreement. But Catherine laughed with a strained smile. Finally, I can say goodbye to you. This house is mine. Don't ever show your face here again." Looking triumphant, she looked up to the heavens, and Tom's face relaxed. "I've arranged for an acquaintance's company to come and pick up the belongings in the evening, so they'll take everything away." I informed them. They said they'd come in a large truck, so presumably, all my belongings will fit. Catherine responded, Yes, please do that. I'll be relieved when you're gone." She hummed a tune and danced her way into the hallway, unaware of the unbelievable events that would unfold the next day. My name is Emma. I am a 70-year-old housewife. My husband comes from a distinguished family, and our house is an old luxury house with a garden, commonly referred to as an estate or a mansion. My eldest son, Tom, was raised very strictly by his father due to his role as the heir. Tom's twin sister, my eldest daughter, scathingly says, "He really is a coward, isn't he? He can't say anything in front of Dad, but acts all high and mighty outside, saying, 'My house is this and that.' When someone confronts him, he hides behind me. I'm embarrassed to admit he's my brother. As his mother, I also think that Tom was not quite the leading figure material. He had a tendency to be subservient, a wolf in sheep's clothing, flattering those in power to somehow get by. When he was at home, his father was that powerful one. But after getting married and starting his own family, Catherine became Tom's powerful one. Initially, when Catherine came to greet our family, she said, 'I'm so happy to be able to live in such a splendid mansion.' As if it was already decided she would live here, even though we hadn't discussed living together yet. According to Tom's twin sister, who went to the same elementary and middle school as Catherine, she was born into a poor family but had a natural female boss temperament, quickly forming and leading groups. She was known as a mountaintop woman within her circle, notorious for using money extorted from other girls to dress up and compete with them. Apparently, her marrying into our family was likely a calculated move to gain a status symbol by living in this mansion. Indeed, our house looks grand from the outside, but financially, things are not so great. I'm just a normal housewife, struggling daily with household finances. My husband, regardless of the costs for maintaining the ancestral home, always said, "We can't sell the house passed down through generations." And never considered selling the property. Our ancestors did business on a grand scale, and it seems that in the past, all the land around here belonged to this house. But now, the only real estate we have is this mansion. Despite this, the property tax is high, but unfortunately, my husband was just an ordinary company employee and didn't have the income to match it. Since we couldn't afford to hire people, I took care of the mansion and trimmed the garden trees myself. I also ran cross-stitch and knitting classes in the house to make ends meet. Unaware of such circumstances, Catherine must have mistaken our family for merely wealthy. Tom himself never talked about money, so he must have thought we were wealthy. His father, perhaps wanting to maintain parental dignity, would recount the ancestral deeds he heard from his grandfather, boasting, "Our family has a distinguished lineage." I just shrugged my shoulders when I heard this. My mother told me, "You have to prop up men, they can't stand on their own." So, I married through an arranged marriage and didn't contradict him to let him stand tall. But getting back to the main story, when I told Catherine, who was thinking of moving in, "Oh, we won't be living together. You two should manage on your own first," I replied immediately. Catherine, surprised at being refused, widened her eyes and said, "That's unexpected, Emma. Usually, people are reluctant to live together, aren't they? It's rare for a mother-in-law to refuse when the daughter-in-law offers to move in." Tom, already under Catherine's thumb, was quietly watching her reaction and behaving meekly. Living with others requires energy. First live with Tom and adjust to each other, then we can talk, I explained logically. Catherine, seeing her plans thwarted, muttered under her breath, subtly expressing her dissatisfaction. Then, Tom, who had been silent, leaned forward and intervened. "Mom, we have spare rooms, why not live together?" But my husband shook his head and firmly said, "You've always been at home too, son. Take this as an opportunity to stand on your own." Unable to argue against his father, Catherine looked at Tom with disappointment. I had heard that Tom was running a business when he got married, and it wasn't going very well. So, they probably had no intention of contributing to the household expenses even if they lived with us. Honestly, we didn't have the means to support the two of them. But I couldn't say that in front of my husband. So, they probably thought our family was just stingy. Since then, Catherine clearly began to dislike me. Even when she came for holiday greetings, she would criticize my cooking, saying, "Emma, you should serve better dishes, or it's embarrassing in front of the relatives." But she would never help in the kitchen, claiming I might ruin my nails. My eldest daughter, who has her own family, was appalled, saying, "What's with her?" Well, typical of Tom's wife, right? Even though he's my son, couldn't he have chosen a better partner? Tom is completely dominated by Catherine, and at gatherings, he only pays attention to her, ignoring us completely. Over the years, the eldest son and his wife stopped showing their faces and became completely estranged. Even if we contacted them, there was no response. We decided to consider our son as no longer a part of our lives. However, one day, Tom came alone and casually asked, "Do you know about lifetime gifts? I want to get it done before you and Dad lose your faculties." I told him that gift tax costs more than inheritance tax, but he said, "It's fine, I just want the house. We'll treat it like you're paying us rent while you live there." It seemed he was after the rent. As much as he is my son, he seems to only think about immediate benefits. But a lawyer told us that legally, the son has inheritance rights. And even if there's a will disabling inheritance, any objection he makes would likely succeed. After much thought, We decided to transfer the house and land to Tom. And the rest would be divided between me and my eldest daughter. We signed an agreement and changed the ownership. I knew they were attached to the house, but I didn't think they could maintain it, which was somewhat surprising. A few days after the paperwork was done, Tom and his wife called my husband out, saying, "We have an important matter about the house. Can you wait for us in the park?" It was an extremely hot day, just going outside made one dizzy. My husband wanted to wait at home, but the eldest son and his wife insisted on going to the park. Reluctantly, my husband went to the park and waited for them. However, no matter how long he waited, they didn't show up. When he contacted them, they kept replying, "We'll be there soon." So, unable to leave, my husband quietly waited, but eventually collapsed from heat stroke and was taken away in an ambulance. Unfortunately, he never returned. I learned about these events through my husband's smartphone. The eldest son and his wife didn't even come to the hospital, but brazenly appeared at the funeral, sitting silently with a sanctimonious attitude. I restrained myself from yelling at them and somehow managed to get through my duties as the chief mourner. After the funeral, it came to the point where they told me, "This house is in my name now. Get out." As in the beginning of this story. As I packed my things and left, Catherine stood at the entrance with a triumphant look, laughing loudly. "You used to act all high and mighty. Serves you right." I could tell she was overjoyed, thinking she's now the lady of the house. For someone as vain as her, living in a cheap wooden apartment must have been unbearable. She lived quite far from our house to avoid the eyes of her friends and childhood acquaintances. With the money saved on cheap rent, she splurged on branded items and luxurious lunches, pretending to be rich. When Tom wanted children, she would dismissively say, "Where's the money for that? Become rich first." To her, my husband and I, who refused to live together, must have seemed like long-hated enemies, hoarding the family's wealth for ourselves. In my heart, I thought, "You asked for it." As I left the mansion I had lived in for so long under heavy rain. The next day, while I was unpacking, Tom called me. I saw the news about the storm and the heavy rain outside and decided not to answer, thinking it must be nothing good. Catherine also called, but I turned my phone to silent, tired of the hassle, and ignored it. In the evening, when I finally took a break from unpacking and checked my phone, there were 48 missed calls from the eldest son and his wife. Just then, a large earthquake occurred, and the building shook violently. I hurried under a table and waited for the shaking to stop. The quake was quite strong, reported as magnitude 5. "Mom, are you okay?" My eldest daughter rushed into my room with a worried look, to which I replied, "Luckily, nothing was around me." "Are you okay?" she answered. I managed to hold down the cupboard, but the bookshelf is a total loss. She looked relieved but exhausted. The thought of being in that mansion at that time made me shudder. It seemed like poetic justice, as if it was divine retribution that such a thing happened the day after they moved in. 2 days later, the TV showed images of houses destroyed by the storm and liquefaction from the earthquake, and there was our mansion. The roof had fallen, the building was tilted, the garden trees were down, and the fence had collapsed. The eldest son and his wife were seen clearing the debris, covered in mud. The TV, perhaps because of its appearance, repeatedly showed close-ups of their house. No other houses had suffered such extensive damage. This was because the mansion was already infested with termites underneath. And a carpenter had warned us, if a big storm or earthquake comes, it'll be dangerous. My husband and I had resigned ourselves to this fact, planning to demolish the house, sell the land, and buy an apartment for our retirement. It was around this time that the eldest son brought up the idea of lifetime gifts. We didn't inform the eldest son and his wife about the mansion's condition, and settled the inheritance such that the eldest son would get the house and land, while the rest would be divided between me and my eldest daughter. Right after we changed the ownership, my husband collapsed due to heat stroke caused by the unreasonable demands of our eldest son and his wife and passed away. Watching the mud-covered image of the eldest son and his wife, I couldn't help but feel a sense of epicaricacy, despite knowing it was inappropriate. The antiques that they had called junk and refused to take were appraised by an expert, and turned out to be valuable ancestral items worth a total of $50 million. I split the amount with my daughter and kept it a secret from Tom. However, somehow the eldest son and his wife found out and showed up at my daughter's house. Catherine burst in, yelling, "Emma, you're here, right? How dare you shove that decrepit mansion onto us?" I calmly stepped in front of her and replied, "Weren't you never going to show your face again?" Catherine appeared momentarily taken aback, but then glared at me fiercely, saying, "The situation is different now. Wait, you sold the antiques for a high price, right? Those were from the house, weren't they? Give them to us." As she pressed on, my eldest daughter stepped in and firmly said, "Hold on, Catherine. Don't do as you please in someone else's house." Undeterred, Catherine yelled back, "Outsiders, keep quiet. This is a family matter. Stay out of it if you've married into another family." Well, I've divorced and returned to my maiden name, so I do have a say in family matters, my daughter replied nonchalantly. Indeed, my eldest daughter had divorced and was living in her own house with her 2 children. After my husband passed away, she called me to live with her, concerned about me being alone. "Living with my grandchildren is a blessing," she continued. "Since you don't have children, my children will inherit our family line. So, I need to be involved in this discussion." Catherine bit her lip in frustration. "But we're the eldest son's family. We're the rightful heirs, with or without grandchildren. These days, it doesn't matter whether the heir is a son or a daughter," my daughter coolly replied. "Humph, what can a divorced woman say? Your house must be a financial mess as a single mother." "Poor you," Catherine retorted with a smug look. My daughter chuckled. "Just so you know, I built this house with my own mortgage. It's paid off, by the way." Catherine looked at my daughter in disbelief, and my son quietly informed her, "My sister is the CEO of a budget cosmetics company. Her annual sales are around $100 million. "No way," Catherine muttered in disbelief. "Well, a little missy who can only flatter men and vie for superiority. Please enjoy your poor life with my elder brother." My daughter delivered the final blow. The ancestral business acumen had all been inherited by my daughter. Catherine seemed to age a decade in that moment, her knees buckling. The demolition of that house will cost a fortune, and given the land liquefaction, selling the property will be difficult. Catherine, seemingly at her breaking point, yelled at Tom without caring about the onlookers. "Shut up, you useless man. You said that house was almost like a cultural property. And if we applied, we could live there for free and wouldn't even have to pay taxes." This revelation made me realize why they were so fixated on the house. Indeed, due to its architectural excellence, it might have been recognized as a cultural property, making it eligible for government-funded repairs and tax exemptions. I didn't think it would collapse," Tom stammered. "I thought it would work if we just applied." "Someone told me it would." As Tom fumbled for words, Catherine berated him. "You always just believe what others say. That's why you never get ahead. The only good thing about you was being the eldest son of that house." Damn it, damn it. In frustration, she attempted to throw a decorative plate at him. I quickly said, That's a $10,000 antique porcelain, you'll have to pay for it if it breaks. She turned pale and tremblingly put it back in place. My daughter and I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Embarrassed, Catherine's face turned red, and she spat, "Don't mess with me," before storming out of the house. Tom followed her like an attendant. My daughter and I decided, maybe we should install a camera in the intercom at the entrance. Right. We just won't open the door. I agreed. After that, they visited several times, but we ignored them all. However, one day, unable to contain themselves, they caused a commotion, prompting us to call the police for suspicious individuals. We watched from the second floor as they desperately fled upon the police's arrival. They never showed up again after that. Tom is now working part-time at a convenience store by day and at a construction site by night to raise money for the demolition of the house. Catherine still seems to be living off her husband, dressing up. But her situation has become widely known among local acquaintances, leading to her isolation. I heard she often sits alone in the park, looking like an old woman despite being only 42 years old. It seems like karma has caught up with those who relied on others' properties, spending their lives mocking others without working or doing any housework. Although they managed to deceive in the first half of their lives, the truth inevitably surfaced in the latter half. As for me, I am enjoying my days, taking care of the housework for my busy daughter and looking after my grandchildren. Compared to the laborious chores of the mansion, the housework in my daughter's home feels incredibly light, almost as if I'm getting the most relaxation I've ever had. I'm gratefully acknowledged by my daughter and adored by my grandchildren. I can't help but hope these happy days continue forever.